Real quick, before we get into the Season 3 recap, if you need a Season 2 recap of Succession, just hit the little tab in the upper right-hand corner. It'll take you to my Season 2 recap. Season 3, however, picks up right where Season 2 left off, with Kendall dropping that bombshell on national television. Everybody's kind of in panic mode. That includes Shiv, Roman, Tom, Carl, Jerry, Hugo. I'm probably missing one or two, but most of the figureheads from Waystar Royco. They've all cut the vacation short and they're waiting on one person, Logan Roy. They're also waiting on some planes to kind of disappear. Nobody knows the game plan, though. Nobody except Logan. When he arrives, he still doesn't answer the question of where they're going. Just getting in a van and heading off so they can wait for the planes. Because truthfully, he hasn't decided yet. Back in New York, Kendall, Greg, Jess, and Carolina get in a car to head to Waystar so that Kendall can, quote, take over the company. But when they get in the car, Carolina reminds him that they're in a company car. And since he just opened up the company to investigation, he probably is no longer an employee of the company. This leads Kendall to ask Carolina if she's with him, and when she can't give a good enough answer, he completely kicks her out of the car. Now that Kendall seems to have his inner circle, he, along with Greg and Jess, head off. But as he's trying to gauge the reaction of his bombshell, he gets a phone call from Logan. So he hands the phone off to Jess to kind of mediate. And Logan called not to rip his son, but to say, hey, decent move, hat tip, but this could get really bad for me, so why don't you retract, and there's probably a deal here. Kendall, however, doesn't give in, saying that he's going to talk to the government and would probably be a wise decision for Logan to step down. That's when the conversation gets pretty ugly. Logan then hangs up the phone call and gets with all the figureheads, and Jerry is going through just how they play this with the Department of Justice. Her plan is to do an internal investigation, tell the Department of Justice they were completely blown away by the allegations, and they're planning on thoroughly investigating them. Pose the question, do they actually have to cooperate with the government? Roman suggests they just don't cooperate at all, but Jerry tries to let him know this is the U.S. government we're talking about. Kind of have to cooperate. We don't know what they have or what they might get. Logan ends up asking Roman, what's our story here? And Roman says Kendall is exploiting these poor women, and that's sad, but he's very unwell. He's a junkie. He blew it. In terms of the papers, they're fake or stolen, if they even exist at all. And if they do exist, you can go after Kendall for corporate theft. For Roman, the play is easy. You completely obliterate Kendall. Logan then asks about how the stock price is doing, and it's about the same, but Frank does let him know that a lot of hedge funds have already planned on what happens if Logan isn't there. Roman then asks, what if you just called the attorney general and yell at him? Would that be okay? But Logan says, no, we're going to go above that. Get me the president on the line. They then get ready to pile on into a plane. But as they're walking over to the planes, Jerry lets him know that she couldn't get the president. She could get somebody else, but not the president. And Logan doesn't want to talk to that person, so he tasks Jerry with talking to this woman and finding out exactly what the attorney general or the Department of Justice plans on doing about the accusations. And the woman on the other line lets him know that the attorney general isn't the person they have to worry about. It's the deputy attorney general, a woman named Marilyn. But as they're getting out of the vans, she gets a phone call from Kendall, letting her know that there'll be a spot for her in the new company. He also did this with Frank earlier. So as Kendall heads to Waystar, he's trying to get his ducks in a row. The one thing about Kendall is, though, he's going to have to find another headquarters because Jess, Greg, and Kendall realize that his access has definitely been pulled. He doesn't want to get out of the car and be embarrassed, so with nowhere else to turn, he's going to head to his ex-wife's house. There's not only a change of plans with Kendall, there's also a change of plans with Logan. They were all planning on originally going to New York. Now, ever since talking to that woman in the government, kind of freaked Logan out, so he's changed plans completely. The first wave is going to go to Sarajevo, which is beautiful this time of year. And the first wave is going to include Logan, Tom, Frank, Hugo, and Carl. It's really just a boys' club. The second group is to find their own country. Logan provided them a list of a bunch of countries, and Shiv figured out that it was all countries that don't have extradition to the U.S. The only person not going is Connor, who is tasked with staying back and, quote, holding down the fort. But before they leave, Logan realizes he's probably going to need a lawyer for this. Jerry suggests someone named Lisa Arthur. She's got a lot of credibility. She's probably the best in the business. Not only that, it also helps with the fact that Shiv knows her. She's kind of a friend. Because of that, he asks Shiv to handle it, get Lisa. That's going to require her to go back to New York. So scrap all those countries with the extradition. Logan once again changes plans and sends Shiv, Roman, and Jerry back to New York to manage the New York operations. Everybody then piles into the planes and wheels up. They go their separate ways. While in the air, Logan has decided that he's going to have 3 dominant firms on retainer. That way, Kendall can't hire him. The next best 5 after that, while he's not going to have them on retainer, he's going to have them doing something, so it'll be a conflict of interest. Kendall also can't hire them. He wants to get an emergency board meeting together to talk to the big shareholders. And to ease their concerns, he's going to tell them that he's going to step back as CEO. So that means they have to find a new CEO. It's really going to be a name only because Logan plans on having a lot of input on what happens, but he knows that to keep the shareholders happy, he can no longer be acting CEO. When he asks them to throw out names, Carl throws out his, Frank throws out his, but the reality is this is going to come down to Shiv, Roman, or Jerry. That's it. And Tom excuses himself to go to the bathroom to call Shiv and let her know that Logan is 30,000 feet above the air trying to figure out who's going to replace him. He really called to find out if she would even want it because you're kind of walking into a disaster, but she lets him know, absolutely I want it. When she returns back to her cabin with Roman and Jerry, Roman inquires as to what that phone call was about, and Shiv lies. But Shiv is unaware of the fact that Frank just texted Jerry about the fact that Logan's picking a new CEO. So whoever's going to be the new CEO is currently flying back to New York. Logan and his group then touch down in Sarajevo, head to a hotel, and continue to talk about who would make the best CEO. Tom, who had told Shiv that he had no interest in the job, starts saying that he likes all of the possible candidates. And that piques Logan's interest because he thinks that Tom is doing the opposite, say how he likes everybody when in reality he wants the job for himself. It seems like Logan's just kind of messing with Tom, and they go back to talking about the 3 leading candidates. But that's when Logan gets a phone call from Roman, campaigning for the job, or at least kind of. He tells Logan that he wants the job, but if he doesn't get it, he thinks that maybe he could learn under the tutelage of Jerry. One person he doesn't think should get the job is Shiv. Logan hears him out, but as soon as the phone call ends, he tells the group Roman's out. Logan then calls Shiv and lets her know that she has to bring Lisa home. So as soon as Shiv touches down in New York, that's the first thing she's going to do. One person that's already in New York is Kendall. He sequestered himself in Reva's house to avoid the media, and Reva has been extremely supportive. Kendall interviews a PR firm, although it seems like he already has a pretty good idea of what he wants them to do. And he's waiting on some other meetings, which one of them includes a meeting with Lisa Arthur. It does get a little awkward, though, for Reva. It is her house. It is her ex-husband. And Kendall invites Naomi over, but Reva puts on a good face, although she does get really pissed off when Naomi orders Greg to open up a pretty sentimental bottle of wine to Reva. Although Reva just lets it brush off her back, lets Kendall do what he needs to do. As I said, very supportive. But before Lisa heads over to meet with Kendall, she gets a surprise meeting from her friend Shiv. And right off the bat, Lisa lets Shiv know, I can't give your father any legal advice. She tells Shiv she just doesn't think she fits. But Shiv also came for herself. Shiv is torn as to what to do. In one situation, she comes out of this thing as the CEO, or she might have to leave Waystar to protect her reputation. Shiv starts to kind of ramble on the fact that she doesn't really know what to do, and Lisa cuts her off and says, I cannot give you legal advice, and I do not suggest that you give me any confidential information. And that tips off Shiv that Lisa has been hired by Kendall, which blows Shiv's mind. Unfortunately, Shiv has to leave that meeting and let Logan know that Lisa isn't with her. And now that Shiv failed, Logan ends up calling Jerry and letting Jerry know that she got the job. She's going to be CEO. And Roman is thrilled, mainly because Shiv didn't get it. He actually calls Shiv up and is gloating about the fact that she didn't get the job. And that's when Shiv instructs her driver, you know what, change of plans, and gives him a new direction to head to. Later that night, Lisa heads to Reva's place to meet with Kendall. And right off the bat, Lisa lets him know that this is a preliminary conversation, so no confidential stuff. And Kendall does his best to sell it, telling Lisa that he thinks she's a superstar and she could be the one to help take down Logan. It would really be the pinnacle of her career. While Lisa's flattered, she tries to get more of an understanding of the situation. And what is going to make it tough is the fact that Kendall wants to take down Logan without implicating himself. He also doesn't want to damage the company so badly that he loses control in the shareholders meeting. So it's a very complex situation. Kendall, though, tells her, I will do whatever you want me to do. I'm your puppet. Lisa starts giving him some advice, and it seems like Kendall has found his lawyer. But it doesn't take too long for the news that Jerry is going to be the acting CEO to start leaking out. And Logan doesn't really care about that, but what he does care about is when Hugo tells him that Lisa Arthur is going to represent Kendall, and he gets real pissed off at that. In episode 2, as Kendall is at Rava's place trying to set up shop, he goes and asks Greg about meeting with Greg's grandfather, and Greg's a little tepid. Kendall confronts him about maybe getting cold feet, second thoughts to hitching his wagon to the Kendall train. Greg, though, reassures him that's not the case, not to worry. He's just a little concerned about everything. He thinks he's too young to be talking to Congress again. He admits to Kendall that Tom has been calling him nonstop. And he's just a little nervous is all. Kendall tells him, I'm not going to burn you, and offers to set Greg up with a lawyer. Kendall then gets called away by one of his lawyers, and Greg starts to head home, but as he's leaving Kendall's place, or I should say Rava's place, he passes by a Trojan horse that was sent by Stewie. As soon as he steps foot out of the building, he gets a phone call from a weird number. When he answers it, it's Tom. Tom had to call from a weird number because Greg wasn't returning the calls from Tom's phone. And as Tom is demanding to know where exactly Greg is and what he's doing, Greg sees Shiv walk into the building. So as Greg is telling Tom about how he's kind of just standing there observing, not really on either side, trying to play both sides of the coin, Tom once again asks if Greg knows where the papers are, but Greg says, no, I have no idea. Before Greg hangs up, he does tell Tom, you know that Shiv's over there, right? And of course, Tom had no idea, but he tells Greg, yeah, no, I know, but let's keep this between me and you for the moment. When Tom gets off the phone, though, he doesn't tell Logan. And Logan's freaking out. He has no idea where Shiv is, and his boat is quickly taking on water. He needs family unity, and he can't figure out where his family is. Back over at Rava's place, though, Shiv has made her way up the elevator, and Kendall is thrilled to see her. As soon as they get alone, Kendall says, I want you to join me. And Shiv tells him, yeah, that's not why I'm here. But I'll tell you that what Dad did to you, that whole sacrifice, that was cold. That morphs into them talking about what Kendall did and how it was a snake move, but Kendall trying to explain that he did what he thought he had to do at the time. After they're done talking about the move that's over, Shiv asks, all right, well, where are these papers? And Kendall assures her that they're safe and they're being copied. Shiv tells him that what he should do is burn the papers, go apologize to Dad, make nice. But Kendall says, no, I'm not doing that. Come on, I want you by my side. And Shiv says, well, then show me the papers. But Kendall's going to need reassurance that Shiv is in fact on his side to show her anything. Kendall then gets word that he has another visitor at the apartment, Roman. He tells the lawyer to send him up, but lets Shiv know, you're the one that I want. And Roman is really coming on Logan's behalf. He wants to see what Kendall's up to, even though Logan did tell him earlier not to talk to Kendall. He didn't want anyone talking to the snake. Roman wanted to see for himself, but he also figured that Shiv might be there. So before heading to Rava's, he headed to Waystar and talked to Jerry about how to start his, quote, apprenticeship. He then headed over to Rava's. And when he gets upstairs, they immediately go into Roman pleasantries, if you will. Really just nothing but insults. But when they finally get into talking about the actual situation, Roman tells him, I'm just here to spy for Dad. And Shiv comes clean that she's just there to get him to back down. They then realize they need to go to a more private location to have this conversation, so they go to Kendall's daughter's bedroom, and Kendall tells them, let's gang up on Dad to take him down. Shiv asks why didn't he come to them before, but Kendall tells them that this was kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing. He did talk to a lawyer, but the lawyer actually suggested that he not do what he did. He then reiterates, I want to team up and go against Dad. And they reiterate why they're there on Logan's behalf. But the conversation gets interrupted because Connor has shown up. It's not out of the blue, though. Kendall did call him. As they wait for Connor, Kendall tells them that ideally he'd want to make a media appearance with all four of them, announcing that they're together, and it would completely kill Logan. Connor then walks in the room and tells Shiv and Roman, you know, Dad's looking for you two. And Shiv tells him, yeah, well, we're here on his behalf. And Connor kind of chuckles and says, yeah, no, me too. With all of them now in the room, Kendall goes into his big vision, how they're going to take Waystar to the next level without Logan Roy. And part of the play is that under the leadership of all four of them, they can really turn Waystar around to just being a good company and not the cesspool that it's been under Logan Roy. Selfishly, Kendall wants this to kind of wash his hands of things because he says that they all knew what was going on. That sparks a debate on how much they knew or if they knew at all. Shiv says she knew nothing, but both Kendall and Connor are like, come on, we knew what was going on. Like deep down, we knew that stuff was bad. After that mini squabble, Kendall says, look, I could do this alone, but I want to offer you guys a ticket to the escape pod. Roman, of course, has some smart-ass answer, but Kendall says, you're happy that he put in Jerry? And Roman says, yeah, I think Jerry's a good leader. And that sparks a snide remark from Shiv, who thinks that she should be in charge. Kendall then gets a text message and tells the group, it's my kids, I just want to go downstairs and give them a hug. So he ends up leaving Shiv, Roman, and Connor alone. When he gets downstairs, however, it's not his kids. It's Stewie with Sandy's daughter and Sandy on an iPad. Kendall asks Stewie, how does this play from the point of view of you guys? And Stewie asks him, do you actually have a case? And Kendall says, yeah, I do. So Stewie opens the car door and says, good. I mean, we're all ears, but I'm telling you right now, I don't really see it, dude. But let's talk. As soon as Kendall gets in the car, he tells Sandy, back me. He tells him the offer they made to Stewie and Grease, they're to stick with all of that, plus more power. Kendall tells him that when Logan offers them the board seats, one way or the other, he's going to end up sidelining them. But when Kendall's team offers him the same deal, they actually mean it. So Kendall wanted to talk to him to avoid a contested shareholder vote. And as Kendall is making his plea to Sandy downstairs, back upstairs, Roman and Shiv are trying to kind of figure out where each of them stand. Neither of them want to put their cards on the table, but they're definitely both interested in Kendall's offer, yet they won't admit it. They're both sticking with the story that they're there for Logan. They both walk over within earshot of Connor, and Shiv does say, with all three of us backing Kendall, if we promise a few seats to the others, he's going to be done, and we need to figure out what we're going to do because this truly is our moment. Roman is hesitant, saying, I just don't think Logan's ever going to fail. And Shiv can't believe it, laughing, saying, he's not dad from 20 years ago, he's dad now. He makes mistakes all the time. And Connor ends up agreeing with Shiv, saying it's really hard to imagine him surviving this if we back Kendall. Shiv says that if they did this today, then a spooked board tomorrow, they could actually win this thing. And Roman's concerned that if they did that, it might actually kill Logan. At that moment, Kendall walks back in the room and says, all right, where do we stand? So Shiv starts asking about the scenarios of what happens if they end up winning. She tells Kendall, if you do win this and take him out, I don't see us coming through in the proxy battle. And Kendall tells him that Sandy and Stu would back down. He's already talked to him. So there won't be a contested shareholder meeting. There won't be a vote. They'd have a settlement. Kendall then goes around the room and says, he was going to send me to jail. And he would have done the same thing to you, Roman, and the same thing to you, Connor. And Shiv, honestly, I don't really know if he would have done that to you, but what do we really owe him here? They then start talking about what the shape of this new company would look like, i.e., who would be in charge? Shiv saying, well, if I backed you, I would need to be CEO, to which Roman starts laughing at. And Kendall tells all of them, I'm sorry, but that just can't be possible. I'm the only one with that kind of resume. I would have to be CEO. Kendall assures them, though, it's nothing more than an interim chair. There'd be new directors, and then after that, they can figure out how to split this thing up. Both Shiv and Roman stand up and say, we have some calls to make, and they head out. Shiv ends up calling Tom. She talked to him a little bit earlier, but didn't tell him where she was. Tom didn't tell her that he knew where she was. But this call, she ends up coming clean, saying that Kendall wants them to band together to take down Logan, and she wants Tom's opinion on things. Roman, however, ends up calling Jerry. He knows that Jerry is compromised because if Roman were to back Kendall, it negatively would affect Jerry in a big way. But he wants her opinion. He asks her, if we band together, who do you think comes out on top? Me, Shiv, Kendall? And Jerry says, honestly, none of you. I think you all get burned by this. Her advice to Roman is to stick with her. She really thinks they're building something great. When both Roman and Shiv walk back in the room, they're greeted by donuts. And who doesn't like donuts? Problem is, the donuts were sent by Logan, and it kind of freaks them out a little bit. Kendall, though, gets the group back on track and says, all right, what does everybody say? Let's wrap this thing up, and we'll make an announcement tonight. And Connor is the first one to say, I'm out. Which Kendall says, all right, that's fine. We don't even need you anyway. You're not needed. But when Kendall turns to Roman, Roman also says he's out. Kendall gets really annoyed, but Roman says, I told you this whole time I was here to spy. That's what I'm doing. After trying to convince Roman to change his mind, he gives up and then turns to Shiv, and Shiv says, I'm out too. I'm with Dad. And that's when Kendall gets really annoyed because Shiv was the one that he wanted. He kicks all of them out, telling them they're making the wrong decision and insulting them in the process. Not the best look. On the way back from Rava's place, Roman ends up calling Logan and telling him that he was able to locate Shiv, and Shiv wasn't being a snake. She was there to try to convince Kendall to burn the papers. Logan tells them that he's flying home tomorrow, and he'd really like it if they were all there to kind of show some unity. And that's going to include Marcia. Logan really needed Marcia to come back because of good PR. So Marcia came back, but she came back with her lawyer. And her lawyer sits down with Hugo, and Marcia explains to Hugo that she was humiliated at what happened. So she'll come back on conditions. She wants more power. She wants more money. This marriage is literally being negotiated by lawyers for her to stay. And it works. The next day, Logan Roy ends up flying back to the States. He's greeted by his family, including Roman. And the paparazzi are snapping photos of the entire interaction. But Shiv doesn't get out of the car. She's still pretty pissed off that Jerry is now the name of CEO. So as they drive off, Logan tells her that he wants her to be president. Although when Shiv asks, what does that mean? Logan says it means whatever you want it to mean. And Shiv gets turned off. It sounds like a fake title. But in reality, what Logan wants Shiv to do is be his eyes and ears to make sure that Jerry doesn't end up turning on the family. And finally, the last person that we really haven't talked about was what happened with Greg. Greg was legitimately concerned about what he was going to do. As he was sitting in his apartment talking to a first-year law student who's a friend of his about his options, he gets a knock on the door from a lawyer, but the lawyer is from Waystar. so he's hesitant to take the legal advice from the Waystar lawyer that was sent by Jerry. He ends up meeting his grandfather that night and asking him to help him out. At first, his grandfather doesn't understand exactly why he would need a lawyer if he didn't do anything wrong, but Greg says if everybody else is heading into battle with armor, he needs some as well. His grandfather tells him that he will end up getting him a lawyer, and the next day, they go to meet with that lawyer, a guy named Pugh. They sit down and Pugh says, priority 1 is going to be your well-being. Priority 2 is going to be to expose the structural contradictions of capitalism. Those are a lot of big words for Greg, and all Greg really cares about is the fact that he won't get in trouble and go to jail. But it sounds like Greg's grandfather, along with Pugh, are going to use Greg as an opportunity to look around Waystar and expose what they've been doing wrong. Episode 3 takes place about a week after Episode 2. Shiv is taken over as the president, and Kendall has been doing a bit of a media tour. He was asked about his relationship with his brothers and sister, and he just said, I hope they're in a good headspace. The article is being mocked in the office. Jerry is taken over as acting CEO, although it's already making waves. She wants to actually have some control, and Logan wants to make sure that doesn't actually happen. It puts Carl in a bind because Jerry says one thing, but Logan says another. Logan ends up getting most of the people in a room. They're going over some daily stuff. And then Tom says there's a rumor that Kendall is going to come in. To which Logan says if he steps foot in the building, he's going to end up punching him. Shiv says that she'll find out exactly what he's planning on doing at this journalism dinner that night, but she wants to talk about what they're planning on doing to counter his attack. Logan loves the idea, but they don't actually get anywhere with it. They then go into try to getting the message out about Waystar changing. One of the ways they're going to do that is through a media town hall that's going to be led by Shiv. Hugo and Carolina have come up with an amazing slogan. We get it. All right, it's a terrible slogan, but it's going to have to be the one they go with for now. The meeting gets interrupted by somebody who comes in and says that they have FBI agents on the phone wondering if Waystar is going to cooperate if they get a subpoena. And the answer to that is no. Logan tells the poor girl, tell the FBI to fuck off. And Jerry turns to Logan and says, I'm just wondering, when are we going to start to play ball on this? And the problem is Logan isn't planning on playing ball at all. And they have a shareholder meeting coming up. It's not the best optics. Jerry tells him, if we don't accept services by the FBI, there's going to be agents here in about 2 hours ready to subpoena us. They could also subpoena you to a grand jury. But Logan is steadfast. Yeah, screw them. I'm not doing it. Eventually in the meeting, Logan ends up leaving, which leaves just Hugo, Carolina, Shiv, and Roman. And Hugo and Carolina tell both kids that Logan feels alone. He needs some help. So what they propose is a business interview. Really, it's nothing more than a puff piece, though, for one of the kids to wax poetic about how much they love their father and how great of a guy he is. Since Shiv is already doing the town hall, that's going to leave Roman to talk glowingly about his father with stories that he doesn't actually have because they didn't have this normal, loving relationship. But as Hugo, Shiv, Roman, Carolina are all discussing that, right down the hall, there's somebody who's really concerned, and that's Tom. He ends up pulling Greg out of his office and showing him a broom closet, telling him that's going to be his new office. Kind of a half-joke, half-serious thing, since Greg did sort of go with Kendall, and he picked his own counsel. But Tom gets real with him for a second and says, I'm actually seeing a buddy about this very situation. He's a lawyer. I'm going to get his take on it. If you want, you can tag along and get some legal advice for free. Greg, however, has plans. He tells Tom that Ken is planning on buying him a watch to say thanks, so he's kind of busy. And later that night, Ken, along with Naomi, the girl from the PR firm he's working with, a couple other friends, they all pick up Greg and they head to this journalist dinner that Kendall's going to be speaking at. They're showing Greg the watch that Ken is going to be, quote, gifting him. The whole time, Greg is saying he really just uses his phone as a watch. Doesn't really need it, but everybody's kind of peer pressuring him into getting the watch. When they end up getting to the dinner, the first person that Kendall sees is Shiv. He actually interrupts a conversation between Shiv and her old buddy Nate. Although for Shiv, it's kind of a lesser of two evils because Nate was giving her crap about how Waystar treats journalists. Shiv does what she's supposed to do. She tries to feel him out and see if he's actually planning on coming in. But Kendall's response is, let him worry. Shiv tries to make the case that him coming in would be idiotic. Everybody needs Waystar to win the shareholder vote, and that includes Ken. So she tells him, why don't you just wait a week? Kendall then takes that opportunity to apologize to Shiv about the nasty things he said at Rave's place. And Shiv ends up pitching Kendall once again on standing down and working together with the family to enact change within the company. But Kendall sees right through it, thinking that she was just put there to get him to stand down. When Shiv ends up leaving the dinner, she doesn't head home, she heads to Logan's to give a report. But Logan doesn't initially bring up Kendall. He brings up the fact that Shiv wasn't the one to talk to the media about how great of a guy he is, and ended up being Roman. He really wanted Shiv to do it because she's his only daughter. What he really wants is for her to glowingly speak about Logan while crapping all over Kendall. Before she does that, though, she wants to know exactly how bad it was at Waystar, and Logan plays it off like it wasn't that bad, a few bad apples here and there, but Shiv knows that's not the case. Logan was on some of those emails. Logan reaffirms, though, that he didn't really know anything. Yeah, they played rough with the odd union boss here and there, but he didn't know the extent of what was going on. Shiv brings up the government digging into their affairs, but Logan isn't concerned about that at all, saying he can handle it. After the meeting with her dad, she finally heads home to meet up with Tom, and that was the night that Tom was to meet with his lawyer friend. He tells Shiv that his buddy told him it's very difficult to see a world where he doesn't end up going to prison. So Tom actually has an idea. Get ahead of it. Go to Logan and throw himself in front of the court as the sacrificial lamb. If he's going to go to prison anyway, he might as well garner some favor with Logan. At first, Shiv says, no, you can't do that. You're drunk. But then she thinks about it for a little bit and says, actually, it's really smart. It's very likely that nobody even goes to prison, but either way, you'll be in the good graces of my dad. But then she once again kind of reiterates, no, you can't. She's already planted the seed, though. Tom is definitely going to offer himself up to Logan the first chance he gets. So that's what Shiv did after the dinner. Kendall headed home with his party. They continued to have some fun. Poor Greg found out that Kendall wasn't actually buying him a watch. He was, quote, hooking him up. Now Greg has to buy a $40,000 watch to not make it look awkward. But during the after party, Kendall gets an alert on his phone that this television show that's kind of like John Oliver is ripping him. And the host has a propensity to rip him quite a bit. Lately, Kendall's been really obsessed with his perception in the media. The whole time, Kendall is acting like he loves it, but the PR firm he hired isn't really liking it a lot. That same PR firm has instructed him not to go in. They gave him the same advice that Shiv gave him. But the next day when he wakes up, he decides, you know what? No, I'm going in. And this isn't going to be in a day or a week. No, he's going in that day. And over at the office, Logan is waiting for the senior White House aide to wrap up a political show on ATN when Tom comes up and offers himself up. Logan can't believe that he doesn't want anything for this, but Tom reaffirms that he should be the one to be thrown to the wolves. Logan tells him it's not going to come to that, but thank you, Tom. After this meeting with Logan, though, Tom heads to an office and ends up calling a law firm to get a consultation. But as he's setting it up, Greg calls him and says, hey, I have something that you guys might want to know. Logan, however, stayed in the production studio and waited for that White House aide to get off. They have a good relationship with each other, but Logan really wants to have a feeling out process of how the president is feeling about the whole situation. At first, it starts off innocent enough, but then the conversation gets pretty contentious. While the president has a good relationship with Logan Roy, his detractors have already assumed that he's going to take it easy on him, which kind of forced their hand to not take it easy on him. Logan, thinking that his buddy could do him a solid, gets really annoyed, saying that the coverage on ATN could turn. This is an election year after all. And the White House aide tells Logan, well, with all our cards on the table, it's not like the president has appreciated your coverage in the first place. Unfortunately for Logan, it doesn't look like the president is going to be able to help him out at all and give him a pardon. While all of that's going down in the ATN office, Kendall is making his way over. All of this is at the behest of Lisa, who is telling Ken that he shouldn't be doing this. It's also worth mentioning that Ken has been telling everybody he has a pardon from the government, and it's something that Lisa's working on, but it's not set in stone. But Ken is heading over, and his family has gotten word of this, and they're freaking out a little bit. They've got a town hall set in 2 hours, and a snake slithering in the weeds. Logan instructs security that Kendall's fired. If he ends up showing up, he's to be cuffed. Jerry reminds him the optics of that would be really bad with the shareholder vote coming up. But firing him would end up being a PR disaster. It would also give the DOJ all the ammo they would need. It's a little too late, though, because Kendall has arrived at this point, and Logan is adamant that Kendall is to be kept out. And security does their best, but it ends up being Carolina and Hugo that end up getting to Kendall first. In order to not really cause a scene, Carolina ends up buzzing him up and allowing him to come upstairs. When Kendall makes his way upstairs, he ends up seeing Tom, and he tells Tom that there is a world where they can work together once again because Kendall liked Tom. Kendall ends up getting back in his office, never once seeing Logan, and realizing that they might be trying to freeze him out. It's pretty cold in there. Either way, he's not leaving, and he actually instructs one of the members of his security team to go pick up a bunch of items. The rest of the Roys, though, have a bigger issue. It's the town hall. This will be Shiv's first real public appearance as president, and she heads downstairs in front of media, in front of a ton of staff, everybody's there to hear her address Waystar Royco. She starts off right away addressing the allegations that were made by Ken. But then all of a sudden, you start hearing Nirvana's Rape Me blasting. It completely throws Shiv off her game. Security starts running around trying to figure out where it's coming from, and there are speakers set up around the office, and it's not stopping. It gets to the point where Shiv can't continue, and she storms off the stage pissed off. When she goes to Kendall's office, there's the speaker equipment all set up, and that's the final straw for Shiv. She ends up typing up a statement blasting Ken, and she calls Connor and Roman over to her apartment to sign it. Just like Ken earlier, she wants unity. But the public statement is really damning. It calls Ken a deadbeat dad, it calls him a drug addict. None of it's not true, it's just cold and harsh. And it's something that neither Connor or even Roman feel good about doing. So they turn Shiv down, but that doesn't stop Shiv from sending it out. And Kendall finds out about it as he's waiting in the green room of that John Oliver type show. He decided to go on it at the behest of his PR firm. He figured it would be good optics if he played along. But when the PR firm shows him the statement from Shiv, he is deeply hurt. He ends up going to the producer of the show and asking that they not talk about it, but the producer brings up that it would be weird if they didn't mention it. The show goes live in 15 minutes, and Ken is having cold feet. He ends up completely ghosting the show, hiding out in a control room, sitting in the fetal position, reading the statement over and over. But that's when he gets a text that might make him feel a little bit better, because the FBI showed up at Waystar Royco, and they're raiding the place. Logan ends up finding out in his office as he's talking to Roman about the interview that he did. The puff piece that he did, sorry. And at first, Logan tries to do the same thing he's done this whole time. Tells them, piss off. But Jerry tells them, no. These aren't the people you tell to piss off. This is the FBI with a search warrant. They're coming in. All of a sudden, Logan's complete mood has changed and he's asking for every lawyer he can think of. They figure this might have something to do with the conversation he had with that White House aide. It forces Logan to completely change his tune, and he tells Jerry and everybody else, cooperate. Let them in. And this could not come at a worse time because Tom is entertaining a bunch of sponsors, and he has to tell the group that if they see some guys running around here, it's the FBI and they're raiding the place. But this does kind of salvage Ken's night. Episode 4 picks up the next day, and Ken is reveling in the fact that Waystar was just raided. He's sitting there with Greg, and it just doesn't seem like Greg is really paying attention, and that's when Greg admits that he just got a text from Logan, and Logan wants to meet with him. And Ken actually tells him he should go because he's got weight at this point. He must be an asset. He is going to turn you against me, but you're not going to turn against me, right, Greg? And Greg nervously says, no, I'm sturdy. So Greg heads off, and about an hour later, Ken has to hop on a conference call. And it's with Jerry, Frank, Roman, Shiv, Carl, Carolina, Hugo, basically all of the heavy hitters. One name that has been mentioned, though, is Logan, although he is listening in the background. Frank tells Ken that the DOJ investigation has caused a lot of blowback for their investors. One in particular owns 4%. His name's Josh Aronson. After the feds came in, he called Jerry direct and told her that he's thinking about switching over to Sandy's group. And the reality is they need that 4%. So they need to court this guy. And by they, I mean he wants to meet with Kendall and Logan together in a room. Kendall starts pushing back on being in the same room with his dad, as most of the people in the conference call try to convince him that it's only a half hour and he should do it. They are 4 days out from the shareholders meeting. Kendall, though, is steadfast. He's not meeting with this guy if Logan is in the room. Logan is pretty pissed off, and he was listening to the call with Shiv. Right before she leaves to go back to the office, he tells her, I want you on Firewatch. Watch the negotiations with Sandy and Stewie. Carl's smart. He likes to be liked. It's not good for our side, so just keep an eye on it. So she heads back to the office, and that's where Roman already is. He's sitting in Jerry's office, and Roman is continuing to try to have the same relationship that he had with Jerry before, but Jerry is trying, unsuccessfully, mind you, to kind of hold some boundaries. Roman, though, feels like they kind of need something against his woke warrior of a brother, Ken. And he remembered that when they went to New Orleans for his bachelor party, they paid off some hobo to tattoo Ken's initials on his forehead. So Roman heads off to try to find that guy, because if they can get the pictures, that would be a real bad look for Kendall Roy. A couple hours later, Logan actually arrives in the office, and he tells Frank that he has to call up Ken and try to convince him to have this meeting with Josh. And since Frank and Ken have a pretty good relationship, Frank is able to do it, but the way he does it is he tells Ken that his buddy Josh doesn't like him nearly as much as he thinks. He also strokes his ego by telling him that he gets to show Aronson who he is as a leader. When they hang up the call, the meeting is set. Couple hours later, Logan Roy and Kendall Roy meet on a tarmac and head off in separate helicopters to go meet with Josh and try to convince him to stay on their side and not go with Stewie and Sandy. They fly off, never interacting once. So while those two are heading off to try to save the company, back at the company, Shiv walks in and asks Tom a very innocuous question, but he gives her a weird answer. An answer as if they're not married, but they're employee and boss. And Tom's been in a really weird headspace since he proposed to Logan that he go to prison. In fact, when Shiv actually walks in on him, he's researching potential facilities. He's got like a top 5. She didn't walk in the office, though, to hear his top 5. She wants him to talk to this ATN anchor about changing his narrative on the president since he decided to send in the feds. Tom, though, is weary of doing that. As I said, he's been in a weird headspace. And Shiv all but demands it. Not as his wife, but as his boss. She also says, "Can you get Greg in line? We need him on the joint defense." Tom agrees to all of it, and Shiv heads out back to her office because she's got a meeting with Connor. Logan realizes that because of what's going on, he's going to have to keep people happy, people that actually know who he is. One of those people is Connor. So Connor has come in that day to get his. What they offer to give him is a network, mainly like a food network or a lifestyle network or even some stocks. But instead of agreeing to it, Connor tells Shiv, "I just don't really feel like dealing with you. You're not really in charge." And he walks out. She gets stonewalled once again when she goes to check on the negotiations between Frank and Carl and Stewie and Sandy. She walks in and asks how it's going, and they don't really give her a definitive answer, kind of giving just a vague response. So she pries. She asks, "All right, well, what are we hung up on?" And when Frank gives her the answer to that, she kind of scoffs at it, saying they have bigger issues to deal with. This takes both Frank and Carl completely off guard. They weren't expecting Shiv to just walk in and start demanding answers for anything. After all, they literally created this position for her a week ago. As Shiv is ready to leave, she says, "Well, don't forget to keep me involved." And Frank very condescendingly says, "We absolutely will." In reality, Frank ends up calling Logan and tells him, "Get your daughter off my back." This actually causes Logan to call Shiv and tell her to back off, which takes Shiv by surprise because Logan was the one who told her to keep an eye on the negotiations in the first place. She tells Logan, "If you give in to Carl and Frank, then everybody starts cutting me out. There's a line here." But Logan just tells her nothing is a line. Everything's moving everywhere, and then hangs up. Whatever the hell that means. This conversation puts Shiv in a really bad mood. She definitely doesn't want to be the token executive. So she doesn't wait for Tom to go talk to that ATN anchor. She does it herself. She barges into a production meeting, basically kicks everybody out, and then tells them, "We don't really like how you're treating the president right now. We want you to be a little more harsher." The anchor pushes back on it. He doesn't like being told what to do, especially by Shiv. He doesn't mind it by Logan, but Shiv is brand new. But Shiv lays down the law, putting it on the table and saying, "This is how this works. We can waste our time cursing at each other, but at the end of the day, you're going to do what we tell you to do." And Shiv is right. The ATN anchor backs off and he starts changing his tone about the current sitting president. So Shiv has been pretty busy. Tom, meanwhile, has been trying to not focus on prison, but it's all he can focus on. While he didn't handle the ATN anchor, he can handle Greg. After all, he's always been able to handle Greg. He walks into Greg's palatial office to try to convince him to sign the joint defense agreement. It's the whole reason why Logan called Greg over in the first place. But at this point, Greg realizes that he has a little bit of leverage, and he wants something. Problem is, he doesn't really know how to ask for it, and he doesn't know how much he can get. He actually told Logan, "Well, I mean, what exactly can I get?" But Logan reminded him, "This isn't the way this works. Why don't you go back, think about what you want, and then come back to me, and then if I can do it, we'll do it." But by the time Tom reaches Greg's already figured out what he wants. He wants his own theme park. He wants to run it, work his way up a little bit, but still be an executive. Tom realizes Greg doesn't need me. He knows what he wants. But that's when it hits Tom that Greg is going to be running a theme park while he'll be in jail. The conversation then takes a really weird turn from some ancient Greek story to Tom yelling at Greg to wrestle him. Tom is obviously trying to see if he can handle himself in jail. It's bizarre. But Greg does agree to sign the JDA, so he is back on Logan Roy's side. And speaking of Logan Roy, both Logan and Kendall arrive at Josh's place. Logan wanted to meet Kendall on the tarmac to kind of map out a game plan, but Kendall said, "No, screw that," and showed up first. This allows Kendall to talk to Josh one-on-one, and he tells him, "This isn't really that complicated. I'm better than my dad, but my dad is better than Sandy and Stewie." He even pitches Josh on an acquisition for the company, trying to do what Frank said and show that leadership. But when Logan walks in, Josh kind of throws Ken to the side because the big fish has arrived. And this is the first time that both Logan and Ken have been in the same room together since Logan asked Ken to go sacrifice himself in front of the world. And this first interaction is very, very awkward. They try to play it off to Josh like they're fine, but it's clear that they're not. The three sit down, and Josh tells them that he has concerns, and they try to tell Josh that he shouldn't have concerns. It's really that simple. Josh then proposes a walk, and they agree because what are they going to say? No, they need to kiss this guy's ass. He goes off to grab a jacket, and it leaves just Logan and Kendall in the room together, and they don't say a word. You could cut the tension with a knife. Josh gets his jacket, and they start walking down to the beach, and he asks them both, how is this going to work? I mean, you're both suing each other. How can you manage a company? And Kendall points out that the Beatles put out some of their best work when they were suing each other, which is a solid point. They put out some bangers. But then Josh suggests that maybe Kendall just walk everything back. Just say he was mistaken, say he was sorry, and get the family business back to being a family business. And Ken thinks that this was all orchestrated by Logan. He starts wondering if this was a ploy, but it's not. It's simply a suggestion from Josh. Kendall's just being extremely paranoid. Logan goes to take a phone call, and Josh ends up pulling Ken to the side and asking, all right, what do you have on him? But Kendall says, I really can't say. And Josh tells him, I understand you're in a tough situation, because if you don't have anything, you look like a fake. But if you do, you risk me running away. The only thing that Kendall tells him, though, is he's implicated. The three then sit down for lunch, and Josh continues to go in on the family, asking Ken if he wants his dad to go to jail, asking Logan what he thinks of Ken. They all say the correct response, but it's obvious the two are putting on a facade. They're telling Josh what he wants to hear in the hopes that he stays with them. At the end of it, Josh just asks them, can you work together? And they both say, yeah, absolutely. Josh kind of laughs and says, it's tough. I don't really believe you guys. And Logan says it'll be okay because Kendall's a good kid. He did a stupid thing. He thought it was right, but everything's going to be okay. We're going to end up having to pay him out. And in the end, I'll still be in charge. But maybe it'll be him one day. And maybe he's actually the best of all of them. And this is a little awkward because Kendall is literally sitting right next to his dad as his dad talks about him. Either way, Josh says, it's nice to hear. He then gives Logan his demands on what he wants in order to come their way. All of which Logan agrees to. They start walking back, but Logan and Kendall are pretty far behind, and it gives the two an opportunity to talk, to kind of leverage one another. Logan telling Ken that Greg's with him now. Ken tells his dad, retire now. If you do, maybe I'll go easy on you. Conversation turns pretty nasty after that. But the more and more that they walk, the more that Logan is getting pretty winded. Logan, however, doesn't want to ask for a golf cart to pick him up because he doesn't want to look weak. His ego, however, ends up costing him because he ends up having problems and kind of collapsing a little bit. As they sit Logan down to kind of get a breather, Kendall starts pitching Josh once again, and Josh kind of looks at him with a puzzled stare and says, why don't you just think about your dad right now, Ken? Turns out Logan was just suffering from heat exhaustion. He ends up getting back to Josh's place and getting back on his plane to head back to the city. While on the plane, he ends up getting a call from the president because that ATN anchor was going in on him. And Logan tells him that they don't control his editorial freedom, but he'll talk to him, try to convince him to go easy on him, but it would be a lot easier for Logan to do that if he didn't have this investigation hanging over his head. That's what was going on one plane. Kendall, on the other hand, was on a separate one, and he gets a phone call from Roman. Now, Roman was able to get the pictures of the homeless guy with Kendall's initials tattooed on his head. He had to pay a pretty penny for it. But he also has blow-by-blow information on how the negotiations are going with Stewie and Sandy, and they're not going well at all. He calls up Kendall to rip him a new one for putting their father in risk of heat exhaustion. Kendall tries to brighten up his mood by saying, hey, the vote's in hand. Josh is a lock. But Roman says, no, it's not. We just got the phone with him. Dad's little meltdown scared him off. He's going with Stewie and Sandy. He told us there was weak leadership and it's fractured at the top, and it's all because you let him see Dad shrivel. He also has zero faith in the post-Dad leadership, so he's gone. And as Kendall looks out on the tarmac, he sees a helicopter arrive with Stewie, and that's when Josh comes up and gives him a bro hug. In episode 5, we have the shareholder meeting, and it doesn't look like a deal is going to be reached between Sandy, Stewie, and Logan. And Logan is in pretty rough shape after his little spell at Aronson's. And this is really stressful for both sides. Both sides have spent $100 million plus to try to win this vote if it does go to a vote. But at the moment, it's way too close to call. Kendall ends up going to wherever his team posts up, looks like a hotel room, and gets a call from Frank, who lets him know that Logan is perfectly content with going to a vote, which is really, really stupid of him. Frank called because he knows that it's stupid, and he wants to possibly use Ken as like a back channel to talk to Stewie and Sandy. So Ken ends up calling Stewie up and encouraging him to try to make a deal because He can't enact change if the family isn't in control. He tells Stewie, I'm your biggest asset in the company. And I know that you guys don't want to do this roll of the dice chance any more than we do. Come on, you want something out of this? Sandy wants to hurt my dad. Let's make this happen. I have an inside track with my dad, and I know that he's willing to take this thing to a vote. I know you guys are angling for a better deal. You have no problem taking this to the brink, but you're not going to get a better deal. He's a narcissist. He thinks he can get on the floor, say a few words, and drag back all the undecided. And maybe he can. So go back to the table. Try to make a deal. And to the surprise of all of the figureheads of Waystar Royco, Jerry gets a phone call from Stewie to meet her. And while everybody's thrilled that they might be able to avoid this thing, Logan is curious on why they suddenly decided to settle. Shiv tells him it's because they know it's the smartest move. But the conspiracy theorist in Logan thinks that maybe they know something that they don't know. So he refuses to go. He sends Shiv, Roman, Jerry, and unfortunately for Frank, he's going to have to go out in the shareholder meeting and kill time. As the group is heading over to meet with Sandy and Stewie, Kendall ends up calling up Shiv and letting her know that a deal can be made. He gives her some tips on how to handle Stewie and Sandy, and then ends it with Puppet Master out. The Royco figureheads get in the room, and Sandy, the older one, is in pretty rough shape. Looks like he dealt with a stroke, and Roman jokes that he's nothing but a vegetable at this point. He's really speaking through his daughter, Sandy. It takes a special kind of narcissist who, after 9 months, decides that even though he's a boy and they're having a girl, we'll still name the child after myself. Anyway, they start going over what they want in a possible settlement, and most of it is completely understandable. Waystar agrees. But the one thing that they want that Waystar doesn't agree upon is veto control of a Roy family member taking over the company. And as you might be able to imagine, that's pretty frustrating for Roman and Shiv. Jerry, however, tells them that the deal is too good. She has to go back to Logan with it. She knows that it screws them over, possibly, but they have to see if Logan's willing to accept. And after a quick phone call with Logan, he's not. Shiv asks, is there anything else that we can do? We're so close to this thing. Younger Sandy talks to older Sandy and says, we're going to have a think about this and we'll get back to you. Now, one of the people who was left out of this meeting was Connor, for obvious reasons. And since no one's around his dad, he decides to take this opportunity to ask for a part in the company, which is a bold move considering they might actually lose the company. But he wants something to build his resume upon when he runs for president. Yeah, he's still hung up on that. So just to shut him up, Logan seems to agree to give Connor European cable. He then gets a phone call from Shiv letting him know that it seems like they've been able to reach a deal. They're really close. They're just waiting to hear from the other side. And when Jerry sees that Shiv called her dad, it doesn't really sit too well with her. By the time that Jerry, Shiv, Roman get back, one person who has suddenly arrived is Greg. Greg has had quite a day. He stopped by Kendall's to apologize for doing the joint defense, and Kendall lets him know that, hey man, it's fine, but I might have to burn you. He would only do it if he thought that it could lead to bigger fish, but he's just giving him a courtesy warning. And that pisses off Greg because Greg was told that he wasn't going to get burned. But Kendall ends this conversation with saying that the only way that he would guarantee he doesn't get burned is by backing out of the joint defense. Greg doesn't say anything. He just walks out because he has another meeting. He has to go meet with his grandfather and Pew. And his grandfather is way more pissed off than Ken. Ken played it cool, calm, collected. His grandfather, however, feels like Greg slapped his good friend Pew in the face because he's known Pew for 50 years. It doesn't sit well with him that his grandson came, asked him for help, and then decided to go join the joint defense without even so much as a courtesy call. After the conversation he had with Ken, Greg starts asking for maybe a little bit of money to cover his backsides on both situations, but that's when his grandfather tells him that he's donating all of his money to Greenpeace, and that includes Greg's inheritance. So by the time Greg shows up at the shareholder meeting, he's not in the best mood. But he's not the only one, because Logan's mood is suddenly turned. He's acting weird. When the group comes back, everybody's celebrating the fact that they're so close to a settlement, but Logan says, nah, something's screwy, and demands that Sandy and Stewie and Sandy don't be let in the building. He has to be talked off the ledge from this absurd behavior. A little while later, Jerry gets a phone call from Sandy, and they've decided to change their offer. Instead of veto power, what they want is for the Roys to get rid of their private jets, which seems like a pretty understandable request to everybody but Roman, because Roman is so incredibly out of touch. Logan, however, doesn't give an answer, just saying, I have to go to the bathroom. And it can't come at a worse time because Carl is supposed to go on the stage and talk. And he was kind of hoping that at this point they had a settlement agreement. So when Carl goes on stage, he sandbags Frank and tells him, hey, we're going to need you to kill more time. And then leaves. When Logan waddles out of the bathroom, he looks completely disoriented. The group is asking him for an answer and all he says is, fuck him. And most of the sane people in the room cannot believe that he just scrapped a settlement because of private jets. While they're trying to make sense of his weird behavior, Roman continues to defend his dad at every single turn, saying that he must know something, he's 6 moves ahead. The group all agrees, though, he definitely turned the deal down, so Shiv has to call Sandy's daughter and tell her no deal. As the group is waiting for the vote, Logan's behavior continues to worsen and worsen. He's making odd requests, including having Tom escort him to the bathroom every time he has to go, which seems to be every couple of minutes. But little do they know that Kendall is headed over there, because he got word that a deal wasn't reached, and he is not happy. He gets a call from Stewie letting him know that there was no deal reached, and he tells him, just don't worry, hold tight, I'll take care of it. By the time that Logan gets out of the bathroom for the second time, he is gone. He's calling Shiv Marcia. He thinks there's a dead cat under his chair. I mean, this dude is cooked. And that's when you find out that Logan has a UTI, and he probably didn't take his medication, which affects his state of mind. And this couldn't come at a worse time because he's supposed to make a speech and try to get all those shareholders who are undecided back. So the group frantically calls for a doctor to kind of salvage this thing. But after they call for a doctor, then they start wondering, at what point did he get like this? Was he like this when he said no to the offer? Should they go back to Stewie and Sandy? And as they're discussing the fact that they can't let him actually take the stage, that's when Ken shows up. And he basically just screams at them that they have to make a deal work, and then leaves. The group sends Jerry down to the stage to try to get Frank to continue to talk, but Frank is done. Instead of following Jerry's orders to stretch the speech, he ends up introducing Jerry. So she's the one who now has to drag this thing out. While Jerry is waxing poetic about how Waystar has changed their ways, a doctor has arrived. He hooks up Logan to an IV, and Shiv is hoping that by any chance they might be able to get him on stage to just say a few words. Shiv asks the consultants on what she should do, and they tell her, we strongly urge you to try to settle. She then takes a vote around the room to see if they go back to Sandy and Stewie, and the only one who pushes back is Roman at first, but eventually he agrees, yeah, all right, do the deal. So Shiv ends up going to try to track down Sandy, the younger one. But Logan's assistant then gets a phone call from the president. Apparently, he's been trying to get a hold of Logan all day, and obviously they can't let Logan talk to him at the moment. They end up putting Roman on with the president because, as Jerry puts it, Roman is bootleg Logan. And the president screams at Roman for the way that ATN is treating him, but lets him know that he's not running again. He's done. He's out. Which means that Logan Roy probably just lost a big asset. But it also means that the president has nothing to lose with his DOJ investigation. It's not the best news for Waystar. Now, down the hall at this point, Shiv has been able to get a hold of Sandy. She agrees to the demands. Sandy, however, wants to go back to her dad and see if he'll agree to it. And that's when Shiv tries to kind of talk Sandy into making an agreement right then and there. She starts off by saying it's a shame that Sandy, her dad, treats her like this, how she can't make decisions. And then she tells her that she needs a like-minded individual on the board, so they're willing to give her group one more board seat. But that would also mean that Waystar needs another board seat, and that would go to Shiv. Younger Sandy is definitely interested in this. And she tells Shiv, all right, let me go see if I can sell this, but this is good. So you've got the two women with vegetables as dads making the deals on their dad's behalf. And a little while later, a deal is reached. When Shiv gets back, Tom grabs her and starts, being real weird to her. And he lets it slip that the reason he's all up on her is because he's been tracking her ovulation in case he goes to prison. He wants to put a bun in the oven because he figures it'll be like a 9-month stint, so he wants something to look forward to when he gets out. Totally backfires on him. Instead of being turned on, Shiv is completely turned off by it. So their marriage is still weird. They end up walking back in and sending Carl down to make the announcement that a deal was reached. And when he does, the whole room erupts in applause. But as he's talking, up walks Ken. Somehow they don't have security to take care of this. They just let Ken talk because they don't have another choice. The first thing Ken does is apologize for the actions of the company. He then asks for a moment of silence for all the victims, and then he starts saying the victims' names. The only thing that the group can do is just shut his mic off, which they do, and Kendall ends up having to leave the floor. To me, who's just watching this on television, Kendall looks absolutely batshit insane. But his PR firm ends up spinning it to make it look like it's better than it is. They find the one tweet that has a positive reaction to it. Him and his team are reading all of these tweets in the basement of the building. Upstairs, however, the Waystar firm is celebrating the fact that they were able to avoid a vote. Everybody seems excited, except for Logan. At this point, he's fully cognizant. He's come back, and he's not happy about the fact that Shiv gave away a seat to Sandy and created a fourth seat. She tells her dad, we talked about this. Adding another person to the board, me or Connor, we couldn't risk a vote. You were AWOL. What would you have done? And that's the thing. Logan doesn't have an answer. He just says, not that. He then gets close to Jerry and tells her that there's blood in the water, sharks are circling, they need to be aggressive with some acquisitions. And when Shiv kind of tries to butt in on the conversation, Logan flips out at her. He yells at her, "Stop buzzing in my fucking ear." So that's a clear indication that Logan is 100% back. Logan also would like to send a message to Ken. He sends his assistant down to tell Ken that he wants to meet with him. But he just wastes Ken's time. Ken is in this room waiting and waiting and waiting. And then finally somebody from Waystar shows up and says, "Ken, he already left. He's not coming." And when Ken tries to call his dad ends up blocking his number. In episode 6, the Waystar contingent is headed to a conference. But this isn't just any conference. It's a conference to pick the next president. Republicans have to act fast now that the president is going to step down in 6 months. So they have to pick who the party is going to back and thus who is going to win the presidency. They're going to do that at this retreat. And Waystar is a big part of it because they own ATN. They can really push the narrative. When they get off the plane, Shiv decides to get in the car with Logan and his assistant Carrie, who Roman is pretty convinced Logan is sleeping with. And Shiv wants to talk about what exactly happened the last time they talked to each other, which Logan just chalks up as he was unwell. But the big reason why she wanted to carpool with Logan was because she really feels like she can be an asset in this situation. She used to be a political consultant after all. She definitely does not think that Roman should be the mouthpiece after what happened with the president and the fact that he doesn't really have any experience in this realm. She's also scared that the leading candidate is the vice president because he sees his chance and that's a dangerous situation. The group then arrives at the summit and the guy who's running the thing, a guy named Ron Petkus, ends up giving a quick speech about how important this summit is because he really believes that the future president is currently in the room, which Connor is convinced he's talking about him. But Petkus isn't wrong. The leading candidates are in fact in the room and they're all going to be vying for the eye of Logan Roy. Michelle Ann, the White House aide, comes up to him and rips them a new one for putting everybody in this situation because ATN forced the president to resign, kind of, not really, but then lets him know that the leading candidate is the vice president. His name's Dave Boyer. He's not flashy, but he's the safest option. Everybody likes him. He's just kind of like mayonnaise. You don't necessarily ask for it, but you don't complain when you get it. As Logan and Michelle were talking about Dave, Roman gets word from some rando that his mother is remarrying, and it's not to the guy that they thought she was dating, it's to some other guy. This dude named Peter Munyon. As soon as Roman finds out, he walks up to Shiv, shows her the invitation, and says, "Did you have any idea about this?" And of course, Shiv didn't. I mean, they've never even heard of Peter Munyon before. They figure if anybody would have known, it would have been Ken, so they call him up. And Ken is extremely stressed out. Lisa and her team try to get him prepared to make a statement to the DOJ, but he doesn't really play ball. Afterwards, Lisa has to tell him that things aren't going great for him. Waystar has now opened up their books. They're doing an internal investigation that looks extremely legit. And what Kendall has isn't nearly as juicy as he once thought. So Kendall's case is kind of drowning, and Kendall decides to blame that on Lisa. When he gets the phone call, though, he tries to play it off like he's not sitting here drowning. Although he also had no idea about this marriage. The group trade insults back and forth, and eventually they just hang up on each other. But the fact that his mother is getting remarried to some guy that they've never heard of is consuming Roman. He heads over to the bar and starts Googling who this Peter Munyon guy is. But as he's doing so, one of the candidates named Jared Mencken comes over, and Mencken is the dark horse in the race. He's controversial. He's not your typical politician. He kind of reminds me of somebody from, I don't know, like 2016, but can't put my finger on it. Anyway, him and Roman really hit it off. And the conversation with Mencken was a welcome distraction for Roman, who was really obsessing over this Munyon guy, but he's not the only person who's obsessing over something. Greg can't focus. For whatever reason, Greg is on this trip, but he's very concerned about being burned by Kendall. He texted him trying to get an update, but all Ken responded with is, "Still weighing my options." He goes up to Tom to get some advice on how to stop thinking about possibly going to jail, but Tom's advice is, "No, Greg, what you do is, all you do is think about it, so that when you finally stop thinking about it, it's a little respite." Although Tom constantly focusing on jail is annoying the crap out of Shiv. She kind of yells at him, but then feels bad about it because, after all, he might legitimately go to prison. She just doesn't know what else there is to say. So their marriage is continuing to be in a weird place. That night, Tom is having trouble sleeping, so he decides to text Greg, and they head off to a diner because Tom is, quote, in training. He's found out that the food in prison is a lot like diner food, so he won't start getting used to it now. So the two stressed out guys start eating some hash browns and some pancakes and some omelets. And that's when Greg asks Tom if he'll fall on the sword for him as well. Figures if Tom is already going to prison, he won't mind tacking on something else. And to his utter surprise, Tom agrees. He doesn't even really want anything in return. He just says that he'll do it. So if push comes to shove and Greg ends up getting burned by Kendall, he's just going to throw Tom under the bus. But Ken still hasn't made up his mind, and the next day, along with his lawyers, he heads to make that statement to the DOJ, but it doesn't go well at all. In fact, it went really, really bad. As Kendall and Lisa are walking out with the DOJ people behind them, Kendall starts making a scene about how this whole investigation is bullshit, how no one's listening to him, and how they're all in Logan's pocket. The whole time, Lisa is trying to calm him down, but he's not listening. And finally, when the DOJ people walk away, Kendall says to her, "I should put a rocket up their ass." And that really pisses Lisa off. She pulls him aside and says, "Do you think you're smarter than me?" Kendall awkwardly says no. And she says, "Well, you might be, but you're not a better lawyer than me." She then gives him the cold dose of reality that he needs about what went down in that meeting. But Kendall doesn't handle it well. In fact, he ends up firing her, deciding to get new lawyers, even though Lisa was, quote-unquote, the best lawyer. Ken kind of feels like that dog in the burning building who just says, "This is fine." He knows that he needs to get somebody to flip from Waystar. Speaking of Waystar, they're on day number 2 of this retreat / conference / whatever you want to call it. And that's when Shiv gets approached by her own candidate who wants to kind of posture for the seat. His name is Salgado, and he's much more of a normal politician. And his pitch to Shiv is that he'll send her dad to prison and put Shiv in charge of Waystar. He does it kind of in a half-joking, half-serious tone, but he's totally serious. After talking to Salgado, she walks over where Logan is holding court with Michelle Ann, Petkus, Hugo, and Carrie, among other people. And they're all talking about how Boyer isn't probably going to win. His stock is falling quick. One person who overhears the conversation is a Connor Roy supporter who tries to throw Connor's name in the ring, but nobody actually takes that seriously. And that's when the 3 candidates, Boyer, Salgado, and Mencken, start in on a pissing contest within earshot of Logan. It's one that Shiv actually gets involved with because she can't stand Mencken. She's seen his shtick before, and she just finds him disgusting. At one point, Salgado says that this is what he does. He's loud and obnoxious, and it's all to get on ATN. But that's when Mencken says ATN is a dinosaur. It's not even needed. And while Logan Roy is a legend, he's no longer relevant. It's a bold strategy, Cotton, and we'll see if it pays off for him, because the group then head up to Logan's suite where they discuss who they're going to pick. Roman, of course, stumps for Mencken. Shiv stumps for Salgado. Connor stumps for Connor. In the middle of the bickering between Shiv and Roman on Mencken and how much he is hated by some people, Tom gets a phone call, and it's from Ken. Ken asks Tom to meet, and they head to the diner, and that's where Ken asks Tom in a roundabout way if he'll flip. He knows that Tom is probably headed to jail. Hell, even Hugo said that the DOJ is loosening their grip on the case and that no big names will go to jail except Tom. It's all Tom is thinking about. Ken, knowing that he has to get somebody to flip, comes to Tom with an alternative. But Tom is still sticking with the company line. When Kendall brings up that Tom knows that nothing goes down without Logan's approval, Tom says, I don't know about that. Kendall's a little frustrated, but he sticks with his game plan, tells him about his new lawyers, and then tells him about granted immunity and the fact that Tom wouldn't go to prison if he flips. Tom then asks, how does this work? I mean, how am I supposed to look my wife, who I love, and this family? How am I supposed to look at all of them and tell them that I'm turning against them because I come over to your side? And Ken preaches some macho bullshit about how Shiv will respect him because he'll be the man of the house, telling Tom that he should bring Shiv over to his side. Tom looks at Ken and says, I don't mean to insult you, but my hunch is that you're going to get screwed because you always get screwed. And the reality is I've never seen Logan get screwed. Tom then starts walking over to his car, and just to get some blackmail on him, Ken starts snapping photos of Tom. And Tom kind of chuckles at the move. But as Tom is heading back to the suite, the argument about Mencken and Salgado continues to rage on. Roman feeling like Mencken will really make ATN pop. Ratings will be huge with Mencken. They won't be with Salgado. So Logan decides to talk to all the candidates. He calls up Boyer first, and just to kind of be a dick, he asks Boyer to bring him a Coke, like he's an errand boy. He then meets with Salgado, and Salgado actually passes Tom in the hallway as Tom is walking back. But in the bathroom, Mencken is being prepped by Roman. Roman does have one issue, though. Mencken is being labeled as a fascist, and it's not a great look. So he asks Mencken if that's like a shtick or is it real. And Mencken says, I don't have a lot of boundaries. I'll borrow from anybody. St. Thomas Aquinas, Hitler, I'm a man for everybody. They then get into a conversation about how Mencken needs ATN, and Mencken points out that ATN needs Mencken. They both kind of know that the other one is right. Mencken then asks about Roman and where he is in all this, and Roman says, I've got some ideas for ATN, kind of to spice it up. Go to a younger demographic. He talks about doing a deep state conspiracy show, but in like a wink-wink kind of way. But really, all of ATN is set up for its star, President Jared Mencken. He then gives Mencken the tip about how Boyer wouldn't bring his dad a Coke, so Mencken's pitch to Logan is he brings him a Coke, opens it, and then he walks out. The group then discusses the candidates, and Roman is smitten. He tells his dad that we came here looking for a horse and we found a T-Rex. He starts pitching Mencken as a winner, but Shiv points out that Mencken's a piece of shit whose chief of staff broke a kid's jaw at a rally. But Roman's pitch about how Mencken would be best for ATN works. Logan gives Kerry the nod, and it's set. Mencken will be the candidate that they back. And Shiv is absolutely dumbfounded that they're going to go with this guy. In the morning, everybody at the conference ends up getting breakfast, and Kerry gives Logan the update that everybody's getting on the Mencken train. Shiv then gets word that everybody's supposed to do a family photo with Mencken, but she wants no parts of it. Logan then walks up to her and asks, are you a part of this family or not? So Shiv ends up agreeing to get in the photo, but she refuses to stand next to Mencken. They take the photo, but as soon as it's gone, Shiv storms out, and it's obvious to Mencken that he is not well liked by one Roy. In episode 7, now that the contingent of Waystar is back, and it looks like the DOJ is loosening their grip, they want to make their big acquisition. It's a company called Gojo. It's going to help their streaming platform not suck. It's an idea that Roman had, but also one that Ken had and Shiv had. It's kind of the obvious acquisition. But Shiv and Roman are completely stressed out. They worked all night on their pitch to the Gojo people to buy the company. And now is the day where they actually have to make that pitch. Tom has to stop the infighting and let them know that they did good work. Now it's just time to execute. As they make their way to the boardroom, they start talking about the fact that it's Ken's birthday party that night and whether either of them are going to go. The answer to that is probably not, because things aren't great with Ken at the moment. Shiv then concedes the fact that it appears Logan is in fact having sex with his assistant who's 50 years younger than him, which to her is creepy, to Roman is awesome. But then they enter the boardroom and they're handed champagne, and they wonder if the deal's already done without them. They find out, no, the Gojo deal isn't done, but they're celebrating because of the fact that Jerry got word that nobody is going to be going to prison, including Tom. The DOJ looked at the books, looked at the way that Waystar was being cooperative, and realized that while it was a few bad apples years ago, there wasn't a systematic problem going on. Everything Ken said was kind of overblown. When Tom gets the news, he quietly excuses himself from the room. He goes to that closet in office that Greg has, gives him the news, and then flips the table and yells as loud as he can in excitement over the fact that he's not going to jail. I mean, he kind of destroys Greg's office. By the time that Tom walks back into the boardroom, they're supposed to be meeting with Gojo, mainly Gojo's CEO, Lucas Matson. But Matson didn't show. He sent his CFO and a whole team of people, but the fact that he didn't send himself sends Logan off the deep end. He takes it as a complete insult over the fact that he won't even meet with Logan. So Logan calls the deal off. And one of the things that pisses Logan off is the fact that he knows that Matson is going to Ken's party later that night. So the fact that he's meeting with Judas, but he won't meet with Logan, really irks the hell out of him. Shiv and Roman, though, don't want to just axe the deal because of this. It's petty. They know the importance of getting Gojo for their platform. They don't want to be a dying media brand. Gojo helps them avoid this. But Logan's having trouble seeing the forest through the trees. He tells both Roman and Shiv, we don't need Gojo. I had Frank reach out to Nan about Pierce again. And Shiv kind of knows that that's a road that's going to lead to nowhere. When Jerry, Frank, and Carl leave the room, Shiv and Roman continue to plead with their dad to at the very least not kill the deal, let them talk to the underlings, but Logan is steadfast that he won't do business with Matson like this. At one point, Logan says, hey, Kerry, what was that thing you said about Matson? And Kerry says, he thinks he's a genius. He's made one good piece of tech. Fuck him. And Shiv is disgusted about the fact that her father is actually listening to Kerry, and lets Kerry know that while they appreciate her input, it's not exactly good tactics at the moment. They eventually are able to convince Logan, though, to let them go to Ken's party and talk to Matson there. Try to convince him that this is a good deal. Right before Roman leaves the room, Logan hands Roman a card for Ken for his birthday. So everybody heads off that night to Kenapalooza, or whatever douchey name that Ken is calling it. And all of the Roy kids are there, including Connor. He's sporting a coat and an injured arm because he got good polling news and he started dancing and slipped and fell. And he won't take his coat off, which is a problem because when you enter the place, they're supposed to take your phone and your coat, which none of the Roy kids abide to. They then enter the party and see what a complete douche fest it is. I mean, it is extremely cringeworthy. One person that's there that doesn't care how douchey it is, they just want a party, is Tom, who's in a great mood. He sees Greg and they greet each other by their names, saying, "Hello, my name's Greg and I'm not going to jail. Hi, I'm Tom and I'm also not going to jail." Both those guys are ready to party it up. Tom's wife, on the other hand, is with Roman. Shiv and Roman have a mission. They're not there to party. They're there to meet with Matsson and get a deal done. That's really it. But they do at least want to say hi to their brother. They find him in VIP, and if things aren't douchey enough on the party scene, Ken is sporting a bedazzled jacket of the 1980s band Boston, although he doesn't really seem to know it. Here, I'll put a side-by-side of the jacket and the album cover so you can see the similarities. It's kind of uncanny. Ken is hanging out with Naomi when he sees his brother and sister walk in, and immediately they start kind of trading insults back and forth, but in a playful way. Roman gives Ken the card that Logan gave to him to give him for his birthday. But Roman says it's from Logan and Roman, which isn't true. As Ken tucks it away, Connor walks up, so now you've got all of the siblings there. He then escorts them into a somewhat art exhibit. He tells them that it's what he feels like society is headed, and it's giant news headlines like failed sibling dies in tragic jerk-off accident, and it's got Roman's face. And then you've got another one that says wife of Tom Wambsgans arrested, and Shiv's face is on that one. Connor Roy elected president of shitting in a bag. And that one sets Connor off. He doesn't find the humor in it at all. Shiv and Roman couldn't really care less about theirs, but Connor is absolutely livid. After all, he's running for president, and he's polling at 1%. That was the good news that he got. The fact that he's polling at 1%, which is 4 million people, but Connor feels like it could really sway the race, and it's only a matter of time before the party starts coming to him, looking to make a deal. So, in order to appease his brother, Ken has it taken down. Ken tells the trio that he has to go circulate, but he sneaks off into another room and opens up the birthday card. And it is a birthday card, but inside, Logan has written, "Cash out, fuck off." And he attached a term sheet to buy out all of Kendall's shares. He then goes and finds Naomi and shows her the card, claiming that Logan is trying to screw with his mind. Naomi inquires as to how much money that is, and Ken says it's $2 billion, but what it really is just Logan trying to screw with his mind. Naomi asks him, yeah, but what if you do take it? You know, because, like, $2 billion is $2 billion? And Ken says, maybe, and then goes in a ridiculous scenario of him buying all these newspapers just to embarrass Logan. As both Naomi and Ken walk back into the party, Comfrey, one of Ken's PR team, walks up and asks if he has any idea where Matsson is because both Roman and Shiv were asking to meet with him. Now Ken knows the real reason why they showed up. He tells Comfrey to have Matsson meet him in a place called the Treehouse so that he can keep Matsson away from his brother and sister. A little while later, Shiv ends up finding out where Matsson is, so they head up to the Treehouse, but they're denied access. They're greeted at the door by Ken, who refuses them entry. He confronts them about the fact that they're at the Treehouse to meet Matsson, and Shiv points out if we do talk to him, we either strike out and get nothing, or we succeed and your net worth goes up by a substantial amount of money. Even with that argument, Ken still refuses them access to the Treehouse. He then thanks Roman for the card from him and his dad and walks back in, and Shiv had no idea what they were talking about. She asks Roman, what the hell was that? And Roman says, it's nothing. It was a little move to ease him out of the holding company. And Shiv gets upset over the fact that she wasn't in on this. She is the COO or CE, whatever her title is, president maybe, I don't know. But she's left in the dark. And if they're trying to buy her brother out of the company, she'd like to know. As those two argue outside, Ken headed back inside to the Treehouse to meet with Matsson, who is having a terrible time. He tells him that his siblings are looking for him, but he tells him that a deal with Gojo doesn't really make sense. Waystar buying Gojo is like Amtrak buying Tesla. He actually tells Matsson that what he should do is buy Waystar, and Matsson completely sees right through it. He then gets word from Comfrey that Rava wants to say hi, so he goes to say hi to his ex-wife, who brought her new guy to the party. Gets a little awkward. Rava asks him, "Did you get the gift from the kids?" And Ken has no idea what she's talking about. He never got any kind of gift. Rava tells him that the kids made him something, and it's wrapped in bunny wrapping paper. So Ken assures her, "Yeah, I'm sure somebody has it. I'll make sure to get it." Rava then mentions how the kids are being bullied by Waystar goons. Asked how much Ken yells at them and whatnot. Ken had no idea about this, so he tells Rava he'll look into it. He walks out of talking with Rava and runs into Greg, and Greg wants to talk to him about something because he wanted to ask Comfrey out, but when he saw her, she mentioned how she might have to brief the press against him. Ken's talking about putting a smear campaign, and she wanted to assure him that she was going to try to word it so it's not terminal. Kind of killed any vibe that Greg had to ask her out. So Greg brings it up to him, saying how he was going to ask her out, but then she mentioned this press briefing, and he wants to know if it's really necessary because things are kind of slowing down with the whole investigation. But Ken tells him no, and she's out of your league, which is something that Greg keeps hearing. He then flat out tells Greg that Greg can't ask his employee out, and then he says some pretty mean things about Greg. He walks away to enjoy the rest of his party, but he's completely unaware that Roman has gained access to the treehouse. He finds Matsson and immediately starts pitching him on the deal. And Matsson admits that what's holding it up is the fact that he doesn't want to really work with Logan Roy. He doesn't want Logan over his shoulder the entire time. So Roman tells him that if he is willing to sell, then he won't have to deal with Logan. He can go through Roman. He can set up shop wherever he wants, and he can use Roman as a middleman to talk with Logan until Logan retires, or dies. Matsson starts crapping all over the Waystar app, and it's something that Roman agrees with, so he says, "You know what? Let's go take a piss on it." He escorts Matsson into the bathroom, opens up the Waystar app, and throws it in the urinal. Thing is about the app, it takes forever to load, so he lets Matsson just piss all over his phone / the app. As Matsson is pissing all over his phone, he says, "So, can I go back to my dad and tell him that you're maybe interested in selling to us?" And Matsson says, "Well, if all this is true, then yeah." They then agree to meet on Monday, and Roman asks him, "If I shake your hand now, can I go and tell my dad that I basically bought Gojo?" Matsson laughs and says, "No, but you can tell your dad I'm in the conversation." So as Roman was sealing the deal, Ken was about to do his big performance, although he realizes that it would be a really bad look. The very last second, he ends up canceling it. He then goes upstairs to where the presents are being held, and he frantically starts looking for the present from his children, but he can't find it. Naomi is trying to calm him down, but it's not really working. Finally, she's able to get his attention and gives him her gift. Although when he opens it, it's a watch. It's not a great gift because he already has a watch. After harping on the fact that it's a pretty crappy gift, he goes back to looking for the present, but he can't find it. And Ken is slowly breaking down a little bit. It's at this moment he's realizing that this whole party is absolutely pathetic. So Ken's not exactly having a great time. Somebody whose night has turned around is Greg. He runs into Comfrey and explains how he was planning on asking her out, but Ken kind of put the kibosh on that. And Comfrey isn't Ken's biggest fan. He has her doing a bunch of menial tasks, and at the last second, he ends up bailing on it. So she tells Greg, "If you want to ask me out, do it." Greg does, and she agrees. "Yeah, I'd love to go out." So Greg is on cloud 9. He's not going to jail, and he did just bag a date with a girl that is clearly out of his league. But over in the corner, Shiv has been stewing this entire time about the relationship between Roman and her dad. She's a little bit jealous. She ends up finding Roman and asking if there's an update on Matsson, and Roman does the typical Roman attitude of not answering, but also giving her shit at the same time, and Shiv's just over it. Roman starts gloating to her about how he was able to close the deal with Matsson, and she was just left out in the cold. And she's just going to have to get used to it because that's just the way things are. They both start trading insults back and forth, and that's when Ken walks by with Naomi because he's headed out, and Roman just has to take that opportunity to get a jab in at his brother. Ken walks back and tells both of them, "You guys shouldn't be here. All you guys did was come here to stab me behind my back. And by the way, Gojo was my idea." Now, Roman turns his attention from bragging to Shiv to bragging to Ken about how he lost. Ken tries to tune Roman out and turns to Shiv and says, "So you like spying on my daughter, your niece?" And Shiv has no idea what he's talking about. And Roman says it's not a big deal. And Shiv is mortified. She can't believe that they're actually spying on family. But not just family, kids. Roman justifies it as, well, Ken's all up in Dad's business, so we'll be all up in his. But that's a line that Shiv isn't willing to cross. And it's another thing that Shiv was completely unaware of that Roman was privy to. Ken ends up leaving, Shiv ends up storming out, and when Roman finally leaves, he ends up calling Daddy and letting him know that he can get rid of the other kids because Romy took care of it. Episode 8 starts out with a board meeting. Stewie shows up, as does female Sandy, and they actually get called into Logan's office because Logan wants to let them know that they're about to purchase Gojo. And that doesn't really sit well with them. Not the business idea of purchasing Gojo. They like that. That's sound. They just don't like the fact that they weren't included and they were supposed to be included in these things. But Logan says that these things are working quickly and that's why they weren't included, but it all makes sense. They then start the call, and one person noticeably absent is Shiv. She's phoning in because she's still pissed off about what happened the other night. The other person that phones in is Ken, even though nobody really wants him to phone in. After the board meeting, most of the family get ready to go to Italy. Ken and his kids go, as do Shiv, Roman, and Tom. And on the flight over, Roman brings up to Shiv about asking the mother if this is a good idea. He did some digging on Peter Munyon, and he realized this guy's had 4 failed marriages, failed businesses, and what he's worried about is the fact that his mother might be about to marry a guy who's just in this for a cash grab and nothing more. But Shiv, who is still pissed off, basically goes with the approach, no, I'm not going to talk to her. Screw it. I don't really care. So it's going to be up to Roman to have this uncomfortable conversation with his mother. Now, Ken is the first to arrive in Italy with his kids, and when he greets his mom lets him know that Peter has printed out this itinerary, but she doesn't want Ken to stick to it because Logan and Marcia are coming, and Logan doesn't want to be anywhere near Ken. And Ken asks her, what is your son getting, and what exactly is your ex-husband, who you hate, getting? And Caroline says, I don't mind, but Peter does. He has his heart set on having all these important people at his wedding, and he doesn't want to rock the boat. So Ken, as he should, takes it as a huge insult and walks away. A few hours later, everybody else arrives, and that everybody includes Connor and Willa, even Greg shows up, and Jerry and her husband. And after getting settled, Jerry gets a knock at the door, and it's Roman. Roman asks if she's heading over to the welcoming party, and she says awkwardly, sure. Let me just check with Laurie, and then we'll head over and we'll talk about the Gojo price, because it's ticking up, but right now it's not an issue. And Laurie is Jerry's husband, and Roman starts joking about how she keeps going on and on about him. She's probably obsessed. She pulls Roman into the hallway and says, by the way, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. You've got to stop sending me dick pics. Roman tries to start deflecting with humor, but Jerry says, no, I'm serious. I figure this is something to do when you're under stress, but you gotta stop. And Roman once again deflects with humor. They head off to the welcoming party, and Roman has an awkward interaction with old Petey Munyon, because the whole time he thinks that Peter is just into his mom for her money. When Peter walks away, Roman brings up the elephant in the room. Should she be really doing this? She kind of laughs him off, and then he says, well, you do at least have an airtight prenup, right? And she says, oh, come on, don't be so unromantic. He explains that he's just worried she's rushing into things, and she says, what do you expect me to live on? Macaroni memorial services? And then she walks off. Shiv comes over to Roman to get an update, and he tells her exactly what their mom said. They both then see Ken enter the party, and Ken enters the party with Comfrey. Comfrey is letting him know about the media request for him, and none of them are that great. There is a podcast interview where a bunch of former journalists are doing an expose on the family, kind of like the Kennedys, and they're digging into all of the family members, not just Ken. She brings up some of the possible stories that they'll hit on, and one of them is the caterer who died at the wedding. When Ken hears that, he tells Comfrey, maybe keep tabs on that one. He then gives Comfrey the okay to go enjoy the party, and she does. She walks right up to Greg and kisses him in front of everybody, because I guess that first date went pretty well. She gets called away, though, because something popped up on her phone that she has to attend to. And Greg then starts getting congratulated by Shiv and Tom for punching out of his weight class. He tells both Tom and Shiv that while he does like Comfrey, he does worry that there's no depth there. And Tom starts joking around about the fact that he was dying of thirst and now suddenly he's a mineral water critic. Greg then sees another woman at the party and says, what about her? I mean, she's attractive. And Tom and Shiv start laughing, saying, yeah, no, she's attractive, but she's also like a duchess. But yeah, man, shoot your shot. They then, though, see Roman walk up to her, and that kind of ruins it for everybody. The good time, though, gets interrupted when everybody from the family gets a text from Carolina, and it's a Lucas Matson tweet that says, going to Macau feeling lucky. And no one knows what that tweet means. They start trying to decipher exactly what this means, because the worry is the fact that Matson is trying to boost the stock price of Gojo. Roman ends up calling him up, but he doesn't get a response. Shiv starts giving Roman a lot of shit for not being able to control his guy, and even Kendall gets in on the Roman bashing. Now, the head of Waystar, Logan, has yet to find out about these tweets. He actually gets approached by Peter because Peter wants to have Logan help him become a knight or, I don't know, some douchey title. Logan kind of yeses him to death to get him out of the way, but then Carrie shows him the phone, Roman walks up, and Logan's mood suddenly changes. Logan's really not into trying to interpret cryptic tweets. He's suddenly thinking that maybe Matsson doesn't want the deal. But both Logan and Roman get interrupted when Ken storms up to him, and he says, "You know what, Dad? I'm sick of this crap. Let's have dinner tonight, me and you, 8 o'clock. Let's finally be done with this once and for all." Logan says he'll think about it, but he ends up saying yes. Knows most of the family is dealing with this Matsson crisis. Connor is dealing with the fact that he's still running for president and still thinks he has a shot. There's a political reporter poking around at what Willa's past job history was, and that could pose a problem for Connor and his campaign. He knows this. So Willa actually suggests they do what they used to do and keep their relationship a secret. She go underground, but he says, "No, I don't want to do that." And then he gets down on one knee and he proposes. Now, it's because he likes her, but it's more for the fact that being married to Willa is better for his campaign. She, however, doesn't respond with a yes. She asks, "Can I think about it?" That night, most of the girls hit the town for a bachelorette party. And it gives Caroline and Shiv time to talk as mother-daughter. They don't have the best relationship, and you see that when they both start kind of insulting each other on, "You were a shitty mom, well, you were a shitty daughter." Even though Shiv doesn't have the best relationship with her mother, she still is concerned. Peter's daughters took Shiv's phone, pretended to take a photo, and exported her address book because they're interior designers, but they have no clients. So that's kind of the family that Caroline is marrying into. So Shiv asks her mom, "Please tell me you have an airtight prenup." Caroline tells Shiv the same thing she told Roman. And Shiv asks, "You do have a good lawyer, right?" And Caroline says, "Yeah, of course." They then move into the divorce between Caroline and Logan and how Logan ended up with the kids. Caroline ends up admitting to Shiv, "I never should have had kids. Honestly, it's a good move by you. I mean, some people just aren't meant to have kids." And suddenly, Shiv is all about making a baby. When she heads back to the hotel that night, she hops all over Tom. She tells him that she wants to have a baby, but then starts talking about business, about how Roman is ready to screw this Matsson deal up, and this could be her chance. She's going to go out and find a better deal for her dad. She's going to show her dad the true value of Siobhan Roy. She tells Tom, "We cannot let Roman become king. And if I blow up Roman, there's nobody left. I take over." They then have this weird dirty talk thing, and they try to make a baby. It's called sex. Roman, meanwhile, wasn't invited to the bachelorette party. And I guess neither was Jerry, because Jerry walks up to him and lets him know that his dad is concerned with Matsson's deal falling through. So he wants to send Roman over to Switzerland to help figure out where Matsson's head's at. And Roman knows this is a big opportunity to save this deal. He has the best relationship with Matsson after all. And the reason that Jerry told Roman and Logan didn't tell Roman himself is because Logan headed off to meet with Kendall to find out exactly what he wanted. They sit down for dinner, but when Ken tells the waiter that the one plate is for his dad actually gets concerned that Ken is going to poison him, to the point where he calls out his grandson to taste test the food, figuring that if it really was poison, Ken would stop his son from ingesting it. He can't believe that his dad actually thinks that he would poison him. Ken kind of shakes his head, but he gets down to the reason of why he called Dad to dinner. He wants out. He's willing to take his deal, $2 billion, and he wants some kind of asset like podcast or outdoor advertising. But he's out. He won't be on the board. He tells Logan, "I won't even speak at your memorial service. I'm a ghost." But to his surprise, Logan says, "I need to think about it. The offer at your birthday was for fun." Kendall starts shaking his head and he says, "Dad, we can't keep doing this. You won. And you won because you're evil. And evil wins. I'm a better person than you, but good guys don't win." And that's when Logan brings up the dead waiter, exactly what happened, why they were in the car together, what they were doing. And the whole point of bringing this up isn't to make Ken feel bad. It's to remind Ken about the fact that when he's in a mess, his dad cleans it up for him. So Logan looks at Ken in the eye and says, "Whenever you screwed up, I cleaned up your mess. And I'm the bad person? Screw you." And then he leaves. The next morning, everybody gets up. Everyone's enjoying breakfast. Connor asks Willa if she's made her decision. She hasn't. Greg shoots his shot with that Duchess, but that doesn't go well because Roman kind of cockblocks. And Tom has a conversation with Shiv about what happened the previous night. He enjoyed having sex because I hear it's fun, but what he didn't really enjoy was the dirty talk. The dirty talk was weird because she kept telling Tom, "You love me, but I don't love you." And that just didn't really sit well with him. It was too close and too real. She kind of laughs at him and says, "Tom, you can't ask people to say terrible things and then get mad at them when they say terrible things." He then asks her if she meant what she said about having a baby, and she says yes. They start talking about freezing her eggs, and then they have an awkward conversation about what would happen if one of them dies and eggs are stored. Roman then flies off to have a conversation with Matsson, and it doesn't go all that great. When he meets back up with the Waystar group, Jerry stops him before he goes in the boardroom to get an update, and he tells her that what Matsson is looking for is really a 50-50 partnership. He's looking for a merger, not a sale. And because of that, he figures that the deal is dead. Jerry stops him and says, "Honestly, this deal makes sense. And if we don't beef up soon, we're going to end up being someone's lunch." They both walk into the boardroom, and Roman is tasked with telling his dad the bad news about Matsson. But when his dad asks him what's going on, Roman actually sells it. He tells his dad that a merger is really just in name only. Somebody has to be the top dog, and that top dog would be Logan Roy. But everything that Gojo is doing improves Waystar tremendously. They're going to have control of all of these different things. Esports, gambling, podcasts, you name it, they're going to have it at Gojo. So merging groups actually makes a lot of sense. Now, this would dilute the family investment a lot, but even Siobhan ends up coming around to the idea. Logan's still a little bit upset over how Matsson's done business, but Roman says, "Dad, it's what you would have done." He leveraged his position to get into this situation. It's actually really smart. So to everybody's surprise in the room, Logan says, "Okay, bring in the bankers. It's at least worth having a conversation about." Roman's doing a little fist pump, and he gets a text message from Jerry saying, "Good job." He goes to respond with a dick pic and a nice little message, but instead of texting Jerry, he accidentally texts it to Logan. And when Logan sees it, he bursts out of the room screaming, "I need 5." Shiv goes chasing after him to find out what's wrong, and then Shiv sees it. She also sees her opportunity to possibly get Roman out of the good graces. She tells Logan, "Yeah, there's a weird thing going on with Roman and Jerry. Everybody knows it. Jerry's probably just not stopping him for leverage. But this is a potential problem. There's a track record here with Roman." He then calls in Roman, and he reams him out, and Roman is completely embarrassed about the whole situation. He doesn't really have an answer when his dad asks him, "Why are you sending dick pics to Jerry?" It's a really awkward conversation. Right before he leaves, Roman asks, "What happens now?" And Logan tells him, "We need to fire Jerry." And Roman says, "I don't really know if it's good optics to fire somebody for receiving my dick pics." And that's something that Logan needs to think about. Down the hall, Shiv has pulled Jerry out of the office to talk to her about the situation. And Jerry brushes it off like it's nothing, but Shiv says, "No, it's not nothing. You're not the CEO of the company. What you should do is file a complaint with HR. Honestly, you should take this to the board." Now, Shiv is manipulating the situation to try to get control back, but she sells it to Jerry like, "You're the CEO, and if you let this sexual harassment go to yourself, it's going to look like you welcomed it." Jerry, however, reminds Shiv that ultimately it's Jerry's call to make, and she'll think it over. In episode 9, following Dickgate, everybody returns back to Italy for the wedding, only to find that Ken has had a suicide attempt. Or at least that's the way it looks. He fell off a floaty, and everybody's kind of concerned about it. Everybody's sitting around playing Monopoly, but Tom has to go. Forbes is doing a piece on him because he's turned ATN into a cash machine, and they want to know how he did it, and Shiv jokes that he did it by turning on the bigot spigot. As he takes off, Comfrey shows up and gives them an update on Ken. He's showing up in a few minutes. The hospital released him. They really just wanted to observe him for a little bit. And everybody's kind of walking on eggshells when Ken does finally arrive. As Ken grabs his kids and takes off, everybody kind of talks about the fact that he does not look well. As they're discussing this, Logan frantically walks by on the phone talking to Carl about something. Roman tries to find out what it is, and Jerry tells him that the DOJ is going to hit them with a historic fine. And Gojo's market cap has overtaken theirs. Because of this, Gojo's board might be entertaining other options. So the Gojo deal is in serious jeopardy. Shiv tries to get an update from Roman, and Roman doesn't really have one. He doesn't know what's going on either. Logan pops back out and says he has to go see Matsson. And Roman excitedly says, "Do you want me to come with?" And Logan says, "No, stay here and play with your dick." But when Shiv volunteers to go with, all of a sudden Logan says, "Yeah, you know what, Roman, you do come with. You actually know him." And once again, Shiv feels like she's been left out in the cold. So Roman and Logan head off to go meet with Matsson. When they arrive, Matsson and Logan say hello for the first time. They've never actually met, but Logan gets right into it. Are we doing this deal or not? And the issue that Matsson is having is the fact that Logan and Waystar are just too old. He turns to Logan and says, I don't want to be rude. You are a legend, but we're flying high right now and you're sinking like a lead balloon. And that's why I make sense as the person to take over. Logan asks him, you're not serious, are you? And Matsson tells him, I would make everything nice for you. I would want you to maintain prestige. I'm not about making you small. But at the end of the day, it would be Matsson's board. Logan looks at Matsson and says, I just don't know if I can swallow this. And Matsson tells him, I get it. If this is a family thing, I understand. And your son, I would need him. He'd be crucial to the integration process. That excites Roman. But Matsson also tells him that as for the rest of his, quote, team, he'd be happy to assess them according to their abilities. So he's not guaranteeing that they keep their jobs. To that, Logan says, no. Matsson says, I understand, but if you want to stick around, maybe we can talk about a asset swap or something. And Logan says, sure. So he sends Roman back to Italy to go to Caroline's wedding, and Matsson and Logan stay and try to see if they can salvage some sort of deal. Roman gets back to Italy and meets with Shiv and Connor. They're going to have a quasi-intervention with Kendall. Shiv asks for an update on the merger, and Roman doesn't give one. That's because Roman doesn't really have one. A short while later, Ken does finally arrive, and everybody tells him at the table that they love him. He realizes what's going on, and they say, Ken, this is serious, man. You tried to commit suicide. But Ken plays it off like he didn't. He simply just fell off a floaty, and that's it. He starts going around the table saying, are you kidding me? You're doing an intervention on me? We should do an intervention on all of you. But Shiv points out that suicide trumps everything. The conversation was getting pretty contentious, but it ends up cooling off a little bit. Ken tells him, I hear you guys, but do you guys have any idea how it feels to be the oldest son? Promise something, and then just like that, it's gone? And Connor takes exception to that, because technically he's the oldest son. He might not share a mother with them, but he is technically the oldest, although he never really had an interest in being in the family business until now. So he lashes out at everybody at the table, screaming out he's the oldest son, and how he proposed to his fiancée and no one congratulated him. He forgets to mention the fact that no one congratulated him because he's still waiting to get a yes from her. So Connor storms off and gets ready to go to the wedding. And as he's outside waiting for his car with Willa, he starts venting to her how his family hates him. He's going to lose ATN in his campaign to a Swede. And when that happens, Willa's going to end up leaving him. So he's got a lot on his mind. And that's when Willa says, you know what, screw it, fine. I'll marry you. All of a sudden, Connor's mood completely changes. The happy engaged couple end up heading off to Caroline and Peter's wedding. A short while after Connor arrives, so does Roman and Shiv. And Roman wants Shiv to take one last crack at their mom to see if maybe this is the wrong decision she's making that day. Or at least talk about the prenup. And Shiv tells Roman she has a prenup. She had her lawyer look at it because she wants to keep the London flat that Logan gave her in the divorce. So that does put Roman's mind at ease. Well, one person whose mind is not at ease is Peter Munions, because a notable person has yet to show up. Logan. Caroline has to walk up to him and say, he's just not going to come. You need to accept it and be appreciative of the fact that I'm here. So unfortunately for Peter, he has to go through with this wedding without Logan Roy in attendance. As Caroline and Peter tie the knot, Cousin Greg has turned into a wedding crasher. I'm talking like Jeremy or John from the movie Wedding Crashers. He's sitting in between that Duchess that caught his eye and Comfrey, neither of which know that he's interested in both of them. He's more interested in the Duchess, and if she isn't really feeling him, then he'll go back to Comfrey, but Cousin Greg has become a player out in Italy. After the wedding, everybody sits down for dinner, or it might be lunch. It looked like it was a morning wedding, and Shiv gives the most awkward speech imaginable. But the thing that's on both Shiv and Roman's mind is the fact that they have been left out in the dark with what's going on with their dad. They have no idea what's happening, and everybody that makes a move that's close to Logan, like Marcia, for example, they suddenly go, do you think she knows what's going on? Connor walks up and interrupts their conversation, tells them about the engagement, finally gets the congratulations he was looking for, but says to him that Willa's been talking to Carrie, and Shiv cuts him off and asks, does she know where dad is? And he says, no, she's sandbagging. But Carrie has been telling Willa that Logan has been trying to up his sperm count. He's thinking about having a baby with Carrie. He's been taking a bunch of nuts and roots and all of this crap. And suddenly Roman and Shiv are like, oh my God, our 70-year-old father wants to be a dad again. Tom walks over and asks what's going on, and Shiv fills him in on the fact that Logan might be trying to have another kid. And he jokes that him and Shiv should get on it because now they're in a space race. And Roman can't believe that these two are planning on having a kid. He says to Tom, no, she can't get pregnant. I know this because she's had sex with so many men. This enthralling conversation gets interrupted when Jerry walks over and tells the group that Matsson's financing guy's private jet just landed, and he's headed over to Matsson's place. It begs the question, why would Matsson's financing guy need to be there for a simple asset swap? Jerry also lets him know that Greg, of all people, has been contacted by a couple of assistants. She's trying to get a handle on it, and she promises them she'll keep him updated. But now both Shiv and Roman are in crisis mode. Roman heads off to try to get Carrie on the phone, and Shiv heads off to try to find Marcia. Before Roman does run into Carrie, though, he runs into Greg first. He asks him about this assistant talk, and Greg confirms that there's a bunch of advisors in town, which is not good news. Roman then speed walks over to Carrie, but he gets stonewalled as to what's going on. Shiv gets stonewalled by Marcia, and when both Shiv and Roman reconvene, they know that this is bad. It's at this point that Roman ends up being honest with Shiv for the first time and tells her about the fact that Matsson did float the idea of purchasing the company. And now Shiv is really pissed off because she can't believe that Roman heard this and then let their father stay. She walks up to Ken and says, hey, we have to talk. And both her, Roman, and Ken go and discuss the situation. Shiv tries to pull the full story out of Roman, but he's hesitant to actually give it. And she lays out what they're currently facing. The fact that their dad is with Carl and Frank at the moment. The market caps have tipped. There's a bunch of advisors in town. Something is going down. But Roman continues to say, yeah, I understand all of that. Dad would never sell. They try to get Ken's input on this, but he ends up just walking over, sitting down, and he has a breakdown. It's so bad that Shiv actually walks over to check on him. It's during the breakdown that he tells them about how he killed a kid at her wedding a few years ago. At first, they don't believe it, but then they realize it's true, and they try to make him feel better any way they can, but it's not really working. Even Roman is pretty compassionate to his current situation. While they're trying to make Ken feel better, Shiv gets a phone call from Jamie Laird, and he lets her know that he was cut out of the deal, but he confirms it. Gojo is poised to buy Waystar. Now they have to go face their dad. They hop in a car, and they're planning on just going and telling him that they don't approve of this. Roman cautions Shiv, though, about going in there guns blazing, because they still don't know all of the details. She screams at him, do you still think Dad's protecting you? Because if we let Matsson in control, that's Dad slamming the door on you. Roman questions if they can actually stop him, and Ken points out, yeah, we can. A change in control needs a supermajority vote. That was in the holding company that Mom got us in the divorce. Dad would need us on board. Roman is hesitant to do it. He doesn't want to turn on his dad, but he gets convinced. They're going to stage a coup. They'll put Ken in the chair. One of Shiv or Roman is CEO, and the other one can have whatever they want, but it's a full-on takeover. They all then hop on the phone, with Roman calling Connor to fill him in on what's going on. Ken calling his lawyer to make sure that this is ironclad, this holding company deal, and Shiv calling Tom to fill him in. Tom asks her, where do I fit in? And she just says, I don't know, high up. There's a lot going on right now. He asks another question about where he sits in all of this, but she changed the subject and says that when they force him out, they're going to offer him a medical excuse, and ATN will go on the air with it, saying that Logan isn't feeling well, he's stepping away, and the kids are taking over. When he gets off the phone with Shiv, Greg comes up to him and starts talking about relationships, but Tom ends up ignoring all of that and telling Greg that there's a possibility that things are about to change in a big way. And he asks Greg if he wants to be a part of it. He promises Greg a promotion, a chance to have a bunch of Gregs underneath him. And that's very appealing to Greg, and he is all on board. A little while later, the kids arrive at Matsson's place. They storm in, and they see the whole team at work trying to get this deal done. They end up finding where Logan is, walking in, and Logan is sitting there with Carrie, Carl, Frank, and Jerry. They ask Logan what's going on, but Logan doesn't want to tell them anything with Ken in the room. He tells Roman, get him out of here, but Roman doesn't. All three kids stay as a unified front. They want to hear it from their dad themselves. So their dad comes clean with it, that he is planning on selling the company because this is the best time to do it. He's going to get out because the company is taking on water. It's a cushy deal for him. He's going to make about $5 billion on it. He tells him our blood's in the water and I have to make moves fast. I have to control the situation to get myself and you guys insurances. Shiv tells him once Matsson's calling the shots, we're screwed. But Logan says, no, he rates you. And this is an opportunity for you guys to get an education in real life. Logan then goes up to Roman and says, I've got you. Let's discuss. But Roman tells him, Dad, I know what he said, but with Matsson calling the shots, we are screwed. Logan once again says, no, he rates you. This is an opportunity. you can trust me. But Shiv says, you can't trust him. Roman is very, very conflicted about what to do. It's the first time we've ever seen Roman at a loss for words. He eventually mumbles the words, please, do not do this. And Logan asks, what if I don't want to listen to you? And Shiv tells him, we can stop you. They then bring up the holding company. And things get extremely heated between the group. Logan asks Carrie to hand him his cell phone, and he ends up calling up Caroline. All the kids are confused on what he's doing. And when Caroline gets on the phone, Logan tells the kids that they were looking over their agreement in the divorce settlement, and they realized it was a little bit lopsided. And it's at this moment that all three kids realize that the holding company's supermajority was taken out at the last minute, and they are completely screwed. Shiv yells at her mom, you just cut our heads off. But her mom, like Logan, continues to say, no, I think it'll be all right. As a last-ditch desperation, Roman says, please. Logan asks, what do you have? And Roman says, I don't know, love? Logan stares him down and says, you come for me with love? You want to talk about love? After what you just pulled? You should have trusted me, because I win. He then storms out of the room. Roman goes up to Jerry and says, Jerry, is there anything you can do to stop him? And she tells him that her sole focus is in the best interest of the shareholders of the company. So how does stopping him best serve her interests? And Roman can't believe that everybody's just stabbing him in the back. Shiv, meanwhile, is trying to figure out how their dad found out about this, and that's when she sees outside of the doorway Logan give a pat on the back to Tom. And it's at that moment that Shiv realizes that her husband stabbed them all in the back. Tom walks into the room and acts like he is unaware of what happened and asks what's going on. And Shiv does tell him that Caroline screwed everybody over. It's never once mentioned that Tom was the rat. And Tom tries to comfort his wife, but she feels completely betrayed. And that is the end of Season 3 of Succession. What an amazing ending. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you like this video. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this absolutely sucked. If you want to leave a comment, I don't get back to you. Don't take it to heart. I just try not to check the comment section because usually they're a cesspool. Nasty comments make me feel bad, but please feel free to talk amongst yourselves. That's fine. I have merch. I have shirts and stuff, so buy it. Don't really care. But if you know somebody that needs a recap of Succession Season 2 or 3 or whatever, please send this to them. But just know, I really appreciate you guys checking this out.